The modern world knows how to consume, but it has forgotten how to feast. We are surrounded by indulgence and obsessed with appetite, yet deep down, we are spiritually starving. But what if feasting could actually be holy? And I don't mean eating just enough to survive. I mean banquet, festival, abundance, the kind of meal where your hunger and stomach are fully satisfied. That sounds strange to modern ears. We are taught to see food as either temptation or fuel. But for the Christian, feasting is neither. Properly understood, feasting is a holy act, one that draws us into communion with Christ and prepares us for the day we meet him face to face. In this video, I want to explain why Christians actually feast, because feasting, when rightly understood, is not just a good thing. It is a beautiful and integral part of the Christian life. And for those of you who just finished the Great Fast, or Lent, you may be more than ready to finally chow down on a burger or jump into a dessert. As St. Paul says, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." And notice that phrase, the good fight. Because for those of you who have been fasting, and especially if you watched my previous video, you already know that fasting is a kind of spiritual battle. But fasting and feasting go hand in hand. So if you want to learn more about fasting, I recommend watching that video after this one. As with many of my videos, you don't have to be Catholic or Orthodox to get something out of this one. But as always, the gifts of the sacraments can fully transform you in a deeply profound way. Also, due to the fact that we have a liturgical calendar, it makes when to fast or feast easy peasy. Either way, stick around, because all Christians should know how to have a holy feast. Now, let's define the term feasting. From a Catholic perspective, feasting is this: the rightly ordered enjoyment of God's gifts of creation through thanksgiving, celebration, and communion. And notice the key words there, rightly ordered, because the very same act of eating can become sinful if it is not properly understood or done in the context for which it was meant. So in this video, we're going to walk through those three important contexts that help explain when feasting is good and why. So first, what is Thanksgiving? Well, it's right there in the word, thanksgiving, the giving of thanks to God. And this matters because everything we have ultimately comes from him. The food on our plate, the chair we sit on, even the air we breathe. Every bit of it is a gift from God. That is why when we feast, we begin by thanking God. We say grace, because the moment we do that, the whole meal is placed in its proper context. Our hearts are prepared to receive it rightly. But without that acknowledgement, something goes wrong. Subtly, we begin to treat what is in front of us as though it were simply ours, as though it were not given to us by God's love and mercy. I go deeper into the importance of saying grace in my video on prayer. And here's a fun fact about the word thanksgiving. The word Eucharist literally comes from the Greek word Eucharistia, which directly translates to thanksgiving. But here is something less obvious. Thanking God for our food, well, it implies that food is in fact good. That creation is good. That material things are good, especially when they lead us back to God. Okay, so food is good, but why does this matter? Because plenty of people would disagree. Many schools of thought, like Gnosticism or New Age spiritualism, push the idea that the material world is bad, and that enlightenment comes by detaching yourself from it, by denying the body, suppressing desire, and escaping into some higher level of consciousness. Even Christians can fall into distorted versions of this. Sometimes people get so caught up in fasting that they begin to boast about how long they can go without food or water, as though that were the point. And yeah, those feats can be impressive, but they miss the purpose entirely. Because God became man in the incarnation of Jesus Christ, he ate the food we eat. He breathed the air we breathe. He walked the ground we walked. And that has radical implications. The material world is good. It is not something to run from. God created it and lived in it without the stain of sin. After all, Jesus celebrated Jewish feasts throughout his life, like Passover, and even made some killer wine at the wedding at Cana. Unlike Gnosticism, and unlike so many modern spiritualities, Christianity does not reject the material world. We do not treat it as a prison to escape from, but as a gift to receive, order rightly, and offer back to God. Next, good feasting also involves celebration. And you know what I celebrate? When you hit the subscribe button. If you do, I will give thanks to you by making even better content in the future. And don't forget to hit the bell, so just like a good feast, you'll know when something good is coming. Okay, enough with the bad jokes. Let's talk about celebration and feasting. A properly ordered feast is always tied to some kind of celebration. But to our modern stomachs, every day feels like a feast. We are either constantly indulging or constantly dieting and telling ourselves that food is bad. But for Eastern Catholics, we have a strict fasting calendar, one in which we intentionally move through seasons of fasting and feasting. In fact, we may even spend more days fasting than feasting. That means every day of feasting, or feast day, is intentional. During normal weeks, most of the days have no fasting restrictions. However, Fridays are a day of stricter fasting rules due to the sorrow of the crucifixion, and Wednesdays because that was the day that Christ was betrayed. On the contrary, Sundays have less strict fasting rules even during the Great Fast, or Lent, because they celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Or take the Annunciation. Even though it falls during the Great Fast, fasting rules are relaxed in order to celebrate the Theotokos, the Mother of God, saying yes to bearing the child of Jesus. And when those days arrive, especially around a fasting season, something very interesting happens. We do not just celebrate the event through song and liturgy, we also connect the joy of the feast or event to the joy of the body eating. And that signals to the body, today is a day of joy. Today is a day of celebration. By depriving ourselves of the good of food during times of fasting, we prepare our bodies to feel the joy of celebration during times of feasting. When Friday rolls around and we fast, we signal to our bodies a kind of sorrow, a turning inward toward the soul. And when we feast on Sunday, we signal to our bodies that it is time to rejoice, to delight in the goodness of the food before us and the resurrection of Christ. This rhythm, aligning the body with the meaning of the calendar, with the joys and sorrows of the life of Christ and his saints, connects our bodies to celebration in a way that little else can. By contrast, modern society is so obsessed with making every day a feast that we lose the spiritual joys of true intentional celebration, and ironically starve our souls in the process. So when you fast this Pascha season, or Easter, be aware of what or who you are actually celebrating, instead of just mindlessly eating because that's what everyone else is doing. The last central point around feasting is communion. There are several layers to this, each deeper than the last. First, let's define what we mean by communion. Nicholas Cabasilas, a 14th century Byzantine mystic and writer, states that communion is when the same thing is present simultaneously to both parties. Let's run with this definition. First, and perhaps most obviously, feasting with other people creates a kind of communion. Why? Because the food they are eating is the same food you are eating. You are not just sharing a table, but one meal, and the same thing is present simultaneously in both parties. And that matters because the same food, though divided into many portions, becomes physically present in all of you at once. There's a real simultaneity there, a real sharing in the same thing. Think of it like this. You do not really share a living space with someone if you only live there when they are gone. That is not truly sharing the space and is just a semblance of it. But when two people live in the same house at the same time, they genuinely share in it and partake in communion with both the house and each other. In the same way, when people feast together, they genuinely share in the meal, and that shared meal becomes a kind of communion. But let's take this a layer deeper. In Catholic theology, partaking in the body of Christ through the Eucharist does this at the ultimate scale. Because the bread is physically and truly his body, blood, soul, and divinity, this means Christ becomes physically a part of us, and we commune in his very being. He, the God-man himself, in all his glory, becomes part of each of us and is simultaneously present in his resurrected body and us. But now this is where things can get surprisingly graphic. Let me explain. If you have been fasting properly, and especially through liturgical seasons like the Great Fast or Nativity Fast, you may notice an anticipation building, a desire or yearning to eventually partake in the feasts such as Pascha and commune. This desire and anticipation is intentional. It's meant to be an icon or symbol for something even deeper. Throughout the Bible, the imagery of weddings appear again and again. Christ refers to himself as the bridegroom and the church as his bride. For example, in the parable of the wedding banquet, he clearly identifies himself with the son for whom the banquet is held. In the parable of the 10 virgins, he again symbolically identifies himself with the bridegroom. But the moment where he refers to himself most directly as the bridegroom is, ironically, when his disciples ask him about fasting. He responds, "How can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast." So what does all of this mean? Well, think about it this way. In Catholic teaching, sexual union belongs within marriage. Before a man and a woman are married, there is anticipation, longing, and a kind of deprivation, a fast, if you will, during their courtship. Obviously, there's a slight difference here in that sexual activity before marriage is evil, whereas breaking a fast is usually not considered a sin. Regardless, even before they meet each other, the desire for that union is already present in human nature. Over time, that anticipation builds until finally it is consummated in marriage. Now, when they are eventually wed, what always happens? a wedding feast. This wedding feast is accompanied by a banquet of food and the gathering of all the people of your life. And then the wedding night happens. Now, if we go back to our earlier definition of communion, that the same reality is present simultaneously to both parties, then the words of Christ in Matthew chapter 19, verse 5, take on an even deeper meaning. The man and woman become one flesh. This is not merely poetic language. This is meant to be graphic. In marriage, there is a real bodily union of the man's flesh with the woman's on their wedding night. A genuine unification, one that reflects something profound about communion itself. During the consummation, true communion of the flesh happens. The same thing is present simultaneously in both parties, and thus they're truly unified in the most profound yet physical way two humans can possibly be. This symbol can even help us understand the Trinity, although that's a story for another time. Regardless, it is clear that a wedding is comprised of both a feast and communion. The communion is usually the consummation of the bride and groom as one flesh. But how does Christ fit into all this? Well, that's easy. It's at the moment of our death. Here's where it gets crazy. In the book of Revelation, it states in chapter 19, verses 7 through 9, "Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding day of the Lamb has come. His bride has made herself ready. She was allowed to wear a bright, clean linen garment. The linen represents the righteous deeds of the holy ones. Then the angel said to me, 'Write this, blessed are those who have been called to the wedding feast of the Lamb.'" What this means is profound. Our entire life, from the moment we are born to the moment we breathe our last, is a life of anticipation, a life ordered toward union with Christ. Each day, though we are not yet fully united to him, we pray and we worship, seeking to conform ourselves more deeply to his divine will. We are not yet in possession of the fullness of divine life, but wait for it in hope, longing for theosis. We yearn for that final union, the wedding feast of heaven, where Christ and his church are joined together in perfect communion. Our whole life is a kind of holy longing, a waiting to be fully united to him. And that is exactly why the fasting and feasting cycle matters, because it's the same pattern. Throughout our life, we are waiting and longing for the fullness of unification with Christ. When we die, assuming we are not damned, we enter fully into Christ's divine life at the wedding feast of the Lamb. We then live in his divine life through all of eternity. Likewise, throughout a bride and bridegroom's life, they constantly deny themselves sexual pleasure. They wait and long for their wedding feast and the consummation of their becoming of one flesh, and live a life together in marriage. And when we fast, we wait and long for the feast day, like Pascha or Easter, and so await the joy of the feast day and the reunification of our bodies with food. The feasting then continues through the season. Fasting is not just about giving things up for the moment. Instead, it is forward-looking. It is a kind of ritual death, a voluntary dying to ourselves, to our passions, to the false fullness of this world, so that we can be made ready for true union later on. When the fast gives way to the feast, the bride is consummated with the bridegroom, and the heart is fully entered into divine life with Christ. Through feasting, we learn to live the very pattern of the Christian life, dying with Christ so that we may be united to him in glory. So as you can see, feasting is more than simply just eating a lot. It's a time to share in the goodness of God's creation through thanksgiving, celebration, and communion. It's a time to recognize the beauty of life and creation. It's a time to celebrate an event or person who makes this life better. And it's a time to symbolically live out the ultimate purpose of our lives, to meet Christ face to face. If you liked this video, be sure to prayerfully discern tapping the like button and subscribing to Byzantine Bro. If you want to learn more about how fasting fits into your spiritual life, I have a video on that. And if you want to deep dive into communion and the Eucharist, I highly recommend checking out my last video. Also, I just kicked up a Discord server open to all denominations. Due to high demand, we are prioritizing Eastern Catholics for the time being, but feel free to apply no matter what beliefs you have. If this or any other video of mine has helped you, and you feel called to do so, I always appreciate any one-time donations through Buy Me a Coffee. I'm also in the process of starting up a Patreon, so if early access to videos and other exclusive benefits interest you, definitely let me know. Christ is risen.